very, very welcome to the next of our question and answer sessions here. Over the course of these 3 days, we'll have 50,000 people passing through the RDS Simmons Court. Our aim and these sessions and throughout the entire hall is to make sure that you go back with all your questions answered. We're going to get groups of 2, 3, 4, 5 people on stage here to answer questions. In the age of the internet, it's very easy to Google a question and to spend 20, 25 minutes waiting, still searching for the answer and not get one. And the joy of Holiday World is you get someone face to face, you can eyeball them, and I can most of the questions that come up, almost all the questions that have come up so far at these forums have been answered from the stage. Should we not be able to answer, get you an answer straight away, we will send you somewhere in the hall where you will find the answer. The topic we have next is beds, and that very, very important part of every holiday, where you're going to put your head at night time, how the whole hotel system works, how the tour operating holiday online travel agent, traditional travel agent, how they source their beds, how they charge for them, and very importantly how the pricing works so that you can actually find the best value that's out there. We're on your side. We want you to get the best value. We don't want, and I have two very, very knowledgeable hoteliers on the. We're privileged to have two very knowledgeable hoteliers with us. We have David Collins from Great Northern Hotels, and we have Stephen McNally, who is president. We're very important to have the president of the Irish Hotels Federation. Irish Hotels Federation is basically the trade body, the lobbying group for all of Ireland's hotels. Almost all of them are members of the Hotels Federation. It's very active. It's something that they represent the interests of hotels. At government levy, they lobby. They also would be representing hotels on consumer items and doing in broadcast media. Stephen will be popping up quite a bit. But most important, it's not just the interest of the hotelier that they put first. They're not really a profit before people organisation in any sense. They're ones that see the future of Irish tourism and the Irish home holiday market as being their future, and they've been very, very active, very actively involved in the Irish Tourism Industry Confederation and in representing Ireland worldwide. It is not generally known that more than 2/3 of all the hotel stays in Ireland are not by wealthy Americans or people coming in on holiday. They're from home holiday makers. Hotels up and down the length and breadth of the country depend very, very heavily on the home holiday market. And that is something that has become very complicated in recent years, much more complicated than it used to be, where you phoned up a hotel and booked a hotel room. Nowadays, there are loads and loads of options and configurations that the consumer has to face when they're looking at a hotel and when they're booking a hotel. And both of these gentlemen are very, very knowledgeable as to how that works. Do you go online? Do you go straight into a hotel? What's the time of the year? So they're the sort of subjects I'll be trying to tease out of them from the stage here. But this is your forum, so we will have mics, we will have spotters, so put your hand up, and if you have a question to ask, as I say, we'll be able to answer it. Great Northern Hotels, Delata Group, they've grown massively over the last few years. In a recession, this surprises me, David, because people were saying we were overstocked with hotels, there were too many of them, some of them should have been closed down. You guys have more or less taken the opposite view. You've been acquiring hotels, and if you get a chance, go to David's stand, because he's an amazing map of all the hotels in Ireland and in Britain. And it's only when you see the number of them that you see the scale of the expansion. Tell us about Great Northern Group and what's been happening, David.
Thanks very much, Owen. I suppose, just as a start, if you don't mind me correcting you, it's actually Great National Hotels. But we've been called worse. Grand National Hotels would be another. Thanks for the introduction. We have 50 hotels throughout Ireland and the UK. 3- and 4-star hotels, roughly split 25 in Ireland, 25 in the UK. We're 5 years young. it's taken us 5 years to get to that number of hotels. They say your first 50 hotels is takes the longest, but we're planning to grow to 100 hotels by the end of this year and 200 by the end of 2017.
Wow.
So there's huge growth there. Where the growth has come from, these are typically owner-operated independent properties. As you say, we've come through a very difficult time in the industry, and the brand such as ours is being built on the back of providing expertise to these independent owners who wouldn't perhaps have the scale or the size or the expertise themselves. So coming together under a group brand has enabled that. But we also, importantly, have enabled hotels to outsource certain aspects of their business, such as reservations, distribution, etc. And that in itself has enabled them instead then to focus on the challenge of providing service on the ground to the customer that's in front of them. So to all intents and purposes, the plan is to continue doing what we're doing. We're a privately run business. I'm one of the co-owners. We employ 35 people. We plan to grow to 50 employees by the end of this year. We're backed by Enterprise Ireland, and we have offices in Ennis, Dublin, and also in the UK. We have no plans to grow into Europe or America. What we do, we know, can travel very well, because most of our growth has come from the UK. The UK is very much like Ireland insofar as it's comprised of lots of independently owned hotels, typically very small hotels as well, 50 rooms or thereabouts. And that's pretty much where we tend to focus. Now, we've also been purchasing hotels. We currently have 5 that we've ownership in, and we also have long-term management agreements. So our business is comprised of both owned and run hotels as well as represented hotels, and that's what we tend to do going forward. We won't always have as many necessary hotels in Ireland as we currently have. There's always churn, but that's with any business. You win clients, you lose clients. The secret is to keep moving forward.
Great, and many apologies.
That's okay, that's no problem.
It is the ground but the football playing Donegal hotelier that was caused me to misname.
Indeed, no problem.
Stephen, the Ladybird Guide to Irish Hotels, they fall into different categories. There's a sort of a city hotel, there's the large town and the suburb hotels, and there's the rural hotels, and they all seem to behave in slightly different ways, which is very important from a consumer point of view. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think hotels in the city naturally probably would be more rooms driven and less food and beverage driven. So you tend to come in and find a hotel in the city centre. It'll be close to attractions. People tend to come to the city to visit the city, use the hotel as a vehicle. Down the country then it gets a lot different, because maybe people may go to a hotel for a weekend because they're attending a wedding or an event. You tend to have a lot more food and beverage, so there's bars and restaurants attached to that. And then you have a lot more activity possibly with leisure centres and golf and all sorts of recreational activities. I think what the hotels down the country have learned as well over the last few years, that more and more people from Ireland are taking their holidays at home. And what they tend to do then is, when they go to places like Westport or Killarney or Kilkenny, what they tend to do is look for things to do in that area, and hotels become a vehicle for that. In other words, we provide 10 good things you could do while you're at the hotel, and then we can also provide 10 good things you could do when it's raining in the area. So really it's all about activity in the countryside.
And we criticised the Celtic Tiger, but a lot of investment went into very good facilities. We were drowning in spas for a little while there, weren't we? And all of those are there still to be.
They're still there, yeah. I mean, the reality is that, as David was saying there, that hotels down the country are being purchased at a lot less than the build cost, and that is the case now. So people who are buying hotels are probably getting very good value in terms of what's there, and the loans are getting reset, But I think we've come through a pretty tough time. The last 5-6 years have been very, very difficult, and you could take that with 900 hotels in the country, and out of those 900, 300 were in some kind of trouble. So we're a lot of difficulty, but we've all come through that now. Not totally through it, but I'd say 70% is recovered and 30% still to recover.
Now, I'm fascinated by this. We didn't lose that many hotels. We lost about 100 hotels. You
cost of
300 were in
so
Charlotte.
I guess if you look at the registered hotels with Fáilte Ireland, because to be a hotel in Ireland you have to be registered with Fáilte Ireland. And Fáilte Ireland's figures a few years ago would have been around about 940 hotels registered. Right now it's around about 815. So you're about 100, 105 hotels. The other interesting thing that's happened is the size of the hotels has increased slightly.
Yeah.
So maybe 5 years ago the average size of a hotel in Ireland was maybe 45, 50 bedrooms. That's now up to 70, 75 bedrooms. So it has shown there's been big development there.
And really, David, 100 beds is really the optimum. You can't really operate a hotel nowadays in today's climate with fewer than 100 beds. It's very hard to do so.
Well, certainly scale counts, all right, yeah, because it depends. Again, the location is so key.
Location.
Having 100
So
bedrooms.
the bypass on the outskirts of a provincial town isn't the place to have a hotel.
Well, probably not. But funny enough, we've found that a couple of our hotels that have been bypassed, they've gone through a period of downtime. Certainly, it has impacted on their business. That passing trade has literally bypassed their hotel. But that at the same time, we've also found that hotels tend to see a resurgence in business, ironically enough. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that hotel management find themselves under pressure to actually engage in different ways with the market, and it forces them to become a lot more proactive in terms of how they promote and market and sell their properties. So, because you do have a lot of hotels, for example, who probably are in a very, very comfortable, cozy position where it's almost like shooting fish in a barrel. They don't have to do any promotion or marketing or advertising. The business literally walks across the threshold. I think one of the key things that's come out of the last 4, 5, 6, 7 years is that hotel people generally, pretty much throughout the properties, both departmental heads right way up to general managers, owners, have had to rethink how they manage their business.
Okay.
And how to actually ensure that service is absolutely key in our business. We're a people business at the end of the day, but it's no longer satisfactory just simply to offer a certain quality hotel room or a certain standard leisure facility or a certain let's say quality of service. I think all of these things combined, we understand now. It's so important to get all of these different fronts working in the right direction, whereas previously it would have been very hit and miss. So I think the period we've come through, whereas some would say it's been actually very counterproductive, I think it's actually been very productive. We've ended up with some of the best properties in Ireland, the UK, possibly throughout Europe, and even worldwide. With some of the best people in the world in terms of hotel management and service heroes on the ground. And, I think Fáilte Ireland and Tourism Ireland get a lot of credit for driving tourism into the country, and rightly so. Some initiatives they come up with, for example, such as the Wild Atlantic Way, have been absolutely world class. But the battle for tourism business has actually been fought in places like this, where you've got customers coming in, directly interacting with tourism business owners on the ground in our properties. Every single opportunity for a client to talk to one of our staff in itself is potentially a make or break situation. We have to, as business owners, ensure that all of those different touch points are as good as they can be. Because there's a lot of pressure coming from alternative accommodation providers, like, for example, Airbnb, who've really disrupted the marketplace and who are appealing to a customer that's probably a little jaundiced, probably a little bored by that generic hotel offering. Right. So the challenge for us is to really engage with customers on a different level.
You're saying Airbnb would cause you to up your game, or sort of offer an alternative to the standard
I think so.
And bed and breakfast package.
And the key thing there is authenticity, whereby you're actually delivering and engaging the consumer on an entirely different level, one that's authentic. And that's what these people who use Airbnb, for example, are really gravitating towards. This is a real experience.
Have you thoughts on that, Stephen? Has Airbnb brought rates down for any of your members? My impression is that you are not unhappy Airbnb is there because it's taken pressure off particularly big events in Dublin.
No, to be fair, I think every hotel realises Airbnb are here to stay, so it's not something that's here and will be gone tomorrow. So that's the first thing. I think David made a good point there. Like if you think about what we offer as hotels service-wise, it's really important that we have the best quality service. I mean, Tourism Ireland and Fáilte work very hard to get people in. We work very closely with them as hoteliers to get people in. And then you look at sites such as TripAdvisor, who will you can go on and check how are we performing. You can look at that, you know. But I suppose with Airbnb, look, it's here to stay. I would be worried maybe because it's not regulated well enough, that possibly it can damage tourism as well, because maybe some people might go to an Airbnb and expect something and maybe not get it. So, you know, there's certain things.
It's quite an extraordinary relationship. We have the European headquarters of Airbnb in Dublin,
yes,
and we've no legislation in place.
Right.
That Fáilte Ireland can't engage with them because the old inspection regime isn't built for Airbnb, right. And we have the one side of our government promoting the fact that this tech-savvy firm is now headquartered here, and we've no relationship with them.
Right. Yeah. So no, it's something that has to be resolved. I think as well that, you know, it's things like safety, fire exits. You know, it's who am I staying with? If I buy Airbnb, I don't really know where I'm going.
Everything's regulated with you guys.
Everything is regulated.
The hangers and the wardrobes.
The number of hangers, the number of pillows, the size of the bedroom, the size of the bathroom. It has to have a bath. It has to have a shower. You know, all of those things are regulated. So, but look, you know, I don't think it's a bad thing for Irish tourism, because, look, we are an island, and we've got to get people on here. And one of the big, enormous things we've had this year is that tourism numbers have grown to 8 million this year. So we've 8 million tourists arriving in Ireland. 4 years ago, we had 5.9 million. So people are coming to visit us, which is fantastic. The measurement from Fáilte Ireland is saying that 92% of those people are satisfied with their visit and would come back. So we're doing a hell of a lot well. But, you know, all these things make us up our game, so we can never become complacent. Whatever happens, I suppose that's our biggest danger is complacency.
Are we short of beds, Stephen? Are we short of beds in Dublin specifically?
I think specifically in the centre of Dublin, certainly there is need for beds. I think in 3 years' time, probably there will be definitely a shortage of beds. There's pinch points in the year. Maybe there's probably 4 to 5 months where Dublin is short of bedrooms. Now there are enough bedrooms, but I think as we get busier, we're going to need more bedrooms. Right. You know, but then that comes back to the price thing, and it comes back to the profitability.
Questions from the floor, and I don't want to hog your time. If anybody has a question, stick your arm in the air, and we will take questions. There's a gentleman up here in the front, and while we're getting the mic down to him. Prices, Stephen. How do you guys price your rooms, and what are the ways that you'd like the consumer to engage with you in booking a room? I know that there's a lot of strong feeling about the way Irish people can book a hotel in Ireland, and 20% of the charge for that hotel room can go to a tech company in Connecticut or somewhere like that. What way do you price the rooms, and how would you like customers to engage?
Well, I firmly believe, and I see it myself, that if you want to book a hotel in Ireland or a guest house, if you go onto their site, in the majority of cases you're getting the best rate.
So hotel
website should be the first, especially far out. Now, as you get nearer, some hotels will fill up, and you got to find ways of finding hotels, and maybe then people will use what we call the online travel agents. But I think what the consumer forgets is that if you pay €100 to the online travel agent, €20 goes to the travel agent, and 80 goes to the hotel. So what we say is, look, use the hotels. I think the hotels price usually their own site at the best rates, and that's the way it should be.
Now, what do you guys do with do you sell on your own site, and then if there's unsold rooms, you call in the OTAs then, or do you do allocations? Or?
You know, it's probably the same as any other hotel group or any other business. In fact, your business comes to you typically from a number of different channels, a number of different directions. And Stephen's absolutely right. You know, your own website, or what we refer to as the direct channel, is often the best value for the customer. We'd always recommend the customer to book
You get all
direct.
of that money, so you're happy.
Typically, yes, yeah, and you get to own the relationship with the customer a lot earlier as well, and there's confidence there for the consumer. That said, being practical about it, it's not always possible to ensure that 100% of your demand comes direct to you. I mean, we're all shoppers and consumers at the end of the day. One, we like to shop around because it's actually a leisure pursuit by any other definition. Now, if you're stuck for a room and you need to get a room, you may not think that at the time, but the beauty about the internet is that it's made it so transparent and so easy for customers to actually find out, to research the market, to find out what's available, the best prices, to such an extent that what we typically find is that whereas customers, and a lot of customers will end up on our hotel sites, they've typically done a lot of shopping on what we call OTA sites or online travel agent sites before they end up with us. In fact, an interesting stat is that about 76% of people who end up on your site and are booked have typically ended up, or at least have previously been, on an OTA site. So they're a very, very good source of research. If you're coming to an area, let's say, you're not familiar with that particular city or town or otherwise, the first thing people do is they might go on to, say, booking.com, find out where all the key hotels are, decide on the top 3, and then check out each individual hotel's website and possibly book then at that point on the hotel's website. So for a consumer, it's very, very convenient. For a hotelier, for a group such as ours, the challenge is to ensure that we get the consumer as quickly as possible and we get them at the rate that we can service their business profitably. The really sort of challenging thing is that, and Stephen's quite right, again, you can pay anything from 15 to 20 to 25% of a commission to a third party. If you take booking.com, what they do is they take that commission that they've earned from selling your room, and they take half of it and they put it into what's called PPC, or pay-per-click advertising. So when you go onto the first page of Google and you put in your hotel name and you say booking.com before it, what they've actually done is they've taken half of the commission off business that they would have generated for you, and they've actually bought your name, and they're trying to head off that direct traffic and get them to book on their site ahead of yours. So it's actually quite a dysfunctional relationship.
They've stolen your name.
Well, that's it.
Stolen your soul.
Now, just on that, if I can just make the point, because price parity is something that's been undone, whereby Booking.com, which would be the biggest online travel agents, owned by a company called Priceline, they literally hundreds of thousands of hotels across the world. They were forcing hotels to ensure that the price they had on their own website was the same price on Booking.com. Now, a ruling in Germany has ruled against that. Okay, so hotels can break price parity. That's very important. I think the next battle we have is where Booking.com will be prevented from actively bidding on what essentially is your brand name or your trademark. And that's the next big battle.
We have a question here.
Yeah. 100 planes.
He's asking how much airplanes you have in Dublin.
How much?
How much airplanes? How much airplanes?
Okay.
All right.
One of the things that fascinates me is that you cannot find the hotel's own website. Sometimes they're not on the first page. Like, as you say, you Google a hotel name and you have all the people who've stolen the name, of which Booking.com, and there'd be 7 or 8 of them.
Yeah.
And then somewhere down at the bottom, the hotel's official website. So you're saying the hotel's official website's the way to go, but you can't actually find the hotel's official website. There's no real way around that.
Well, there is, insofar as if you have your site properly optimized, which is a technical sounding term, I know, but basically, if it is, Google basically is a privately owned business ultimately, and what they want to ensure is that the content that they're putting in front of visitors is actually good quality content. So in other words, what they're returning for example, to a consumer who's put in a particular search for, say, Hotels Dublin, is actually relevant to that search. Now, to be sure that you get onto the first page of Google, which is where 80% of traffic pretty much doesn't go beyond. Okay, so it's very, very important to be there. You've got to optimize your site. You've got to ensure that the content of your site reflects these different search terms. As a sort of an insurance for that, you can also buy traffic. So one is called generating organic traffic through the organic content on the site. The other is buying the traffic through PPC, which is expensive, as I said. You're competing against guys who have lots and lots and lots of cash. So in the event of a hotelier or a hotel group or otherwise, any business in fact, you've got to ensure that your site is properly optimized for search. And the challenge is that Google and Yahoo and Bing make it as difficult as possible, because it's in their business to sell you advertising, but also to ensure that the quality of the content that they present is as good as it can be. And those algorithms that they use to determine whether or not you get onto page 1 or page 2 or otherwise, they're constantly changing. So I'm old enough and ugly enough to remember a time without internet and websites, where the marketplace basically was the daily newspaper, or possibly radio, or possibly TV if your budget stretched that far. A lot of those mediums are now beginning to be surpassed in terms of actual ad spend in favour of online. The really, it's frightening for me, because I'm 50, I'm in this business nearly 30 years, is that there's a new thing called programmatic marketing which is coming into play, which is actually automating these decisions as to where money should be spent.
Yes.
Okay? And what that means is that computers are actually making the decisions as to where the marketing budget will actually be allocated. And that's possible because what's happening is that they're taking all of these different data feeds from consumer behavior, because a lot of the things these days are connected, okay? And eventually this is going to be referred to as the Internet of Things. It's actually been referred to as the Industrial Revolution for our time, where all of these data points are connected to the point that people are not required to make decisions anymore. So you as a consumer, you may not be thinking of, let's say, buying a new car, or going away on a hotel break, or buying a meal, for example. But somewhere in the ether, we've looked at your buying behavior, when you buy, what you buy, how much you spend. And if you're, say, Googling online, or you're on your mobile, or wherever you may be in an online environment, you'll find a message will be presented to you which will prompt you to do that very thing that that particular medium thinks you should be doing, which is quite intimidating when you think about it, but the possibilities are endless.
I want to answer your question here. You're asking about the air routes for Dublin. The airplanes coming to Dublin. We've got really exciting ones. We've got a new flight to Cancun this year. We've got a new flight to Montego Bay in Jamaica. We've got a new flight to Vancouver, and we've got new flights at 11 routes in Europe. 2 airlines, Ryanair and Aegean, going to Athens, and we've got Ryanair going to Viga. We've got Aer Lingus going to 3 different countries, and we've also got extra capacity on a lot of them, 20% more capacity on the whole North American market, and Los Angeles and Hartford, Connecticut, Aer Lingus, new routes there. Thank you very much. Your great question. Thank you. That's what we got from. Thank you. Question from the floor. Is anybody here? Hands up. Okay, the big question, Stephen. Best price. How do you get the best price? When do you book? Is it 6 weeks in advance, 4 weeks in advance, 2 weeks in advance? When do you actually jump to get the price that would be the best value?
Well, I think it's like everything. If the later you leave something to do it, usually it's the higher price. That's the way things work generally. What we would find in the hotel business, that as hotels sell more rooms, they'll start putting the price up, and it's like an airline. As the airline gets busier, they'll start putting the price up. If there's special events on, obviously you're going to pay higher events prices for those.
English rugby match weekend is not the time to go to Dublin.
I've seen English rugby match weekends, and you book 2 months out, you're still getting very good deals.
Okay.
But if you leave it until the week before the match, generally you're then down to the last few rooms that are left, and you may end up paying a lot more than what you could have.
Right.
You know,
it's not quite airplanes though.
No.
Because there is no booking.com in airplanes.
No.
You can actually end up in this extraordinary situation, guys, where you go onto the hotel website and it says full.
Yeah.
And you go onto booking.com and there's the room that was you can't buy from the hotel for sale.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, I think what often happens is, and we see it, if it's the last day, let's say tonight is Saturday in Dublin, and it's pretty busy tonight. If I'm looking for rooms in Dublin tonight, I'm not actually sure. If all I hear is Dublin is full, how am I going to find the room? And this is where people go away from the hotel's own site to say, let me find a site that has the capacity, or all the hotels that may have rooms tonight. And that's how they may find them. And what often happens with some of the companies, they'll get allocations from the hotels.
Okay.
And they'll keep those.
Right, Stephen, this leaves you with a headache. Your hotel is full.
Yeah.
Somebody arrives and they said, I've got a printout from Booking.com.
Yeah.
I want my room. What happens?
No, I mean, if Booking.com have availability, then we have the space for that business. There's very few times that, in fact, I don't know any occasion where if you make a booking and you have a receipt, you'll always get the room.
You'll always get the room.
That's the way it works. It's not a case of...
David, I mean, there are people in the room or people in the hall from the travel trade who remember
bookouts.
Mallorca being oversold by 300%, hotels in Mallorca, and a young rep trying to house people.
The cost of that now is probably not worth it. You know,
Okay.
I mean, if you look at if
the penalties are too great.
If a customer arrives at the hotel and there's no space, there's a good chance next door is no space either. So that means you got to find them a hotel of the equivalent style, value, etc. And by the way, the city is probably full, so you're going to end up paying double for that room, taxis, bringing them back,
That's your entitlement.
and the reputation. So what
your
you got to do is mind your
entitlement is the same standard or higher.
Absolutely.
You can't go from 3-star down to 2-star.
Unless they agree that, but generally not.
David, overbooking, does it happen anymore?
It can happen, certainly, largely through, I think, human error. The hotel channel is usually the last channel to close. If you feel that you're going to fill, and I would say, in fact, and I don't know if Stephen finds this, but 80% of our business arrives within 4 weeks of booking, which is a very, very short lead-in.
Okay.
80% of our business. Now, as Stephen said earlier on, nearly 70% of the business, or maybe with yourself, 70% of the tourism in Ireland is actually from the domestic market. Okay, we have a lot of our demand coming from the domestic tourism market. We have obviously tour groups that come in from abroad, and they book a year out, let's say. But most of our business arrives within 4 weeks of booking. Okay, so that means effectively that we've got to have, at the very least, 12 different marketing campaigns going throughout the year. Right, so we're constant. Now, again, back in the day, you could be guaranteed that you put a brochure out in January, let's say, and exactly, you sell 40% of the business.
The price is set in stone.
Exactly, and then I moved to, let's say, spring, summer, autumn, winter, seasonal pricing. But then it got to the stage where, for example, people started using the internet, people become a little bit more affluent, going away more often, etc. It was certainly the challenge is on us to ensure that the price we charge is the price which keeps us in the market, the customer is going to pay, and we'll be able to make a return from it. And that's a huge challenge. And one point, if I could make, in regards to the Airbnb group, because it's not just Airbnb. I mean, there are other shared accommodation providers out there. I mean, 20 million customers worldwide can't be bad in fairness to Airbnb. But the challenge is that their, if you like, accommodation providers don't operate off the same cost base as hotels, okay? So they don't have rates bills. They have water bills now, but hotels have been paying water bills for eons, okay? The regulation isn't there. And if it is here to stay, and it is ironic that their headquarters is here in Ireland, but if it is here to stay, and I think it is, or some shape or form of it, it's important that the cost base is standardised. It's the same. It has to be a level playing field, okay? Yeah. It's a very welcome addition to the tourism mix, but it has to be fair game for everybody.
This is the last word. We have to wind up now, but if there's any more questions, this is your last chance. Hands up. Everybody happy? I'll throw one last question, Stephen. The price indices that show up from Trivago and Hotels.com and all of that, they say it's always the same. Galway is really expensive. Limerick is always the cheapest. Kilkenny is amazingly expensive. Waterford is always the cheapest. Dublin and Belfast about halfway down. Do you pay any stock in those? Because I've heard you being quite critical of this. And how do you actually tell what the average hotel price is?
Yeah, well, I mean, we obviously, within the industry, we have our own statistics, and we have, for example, STR will accumulate the statistics and give us out the average rates. what happens in a hotel, and David referred to it earlier, is it's broken into different segments. So your business comes from different areas. So for example, if somebody is booking from a company, Bank of Ireland, Google or Aer Lingus, they'll book directly with the hotel. You'll also have a tour group, and David mentioned those. The coach tour will ring the hotel and they'll book direct as well. Then you'll have the hotel's own website. So only a small percentage of hotel's business comes from the online travel agent. And very often when they're quoting a price, they're quoting last room availability. They're quoting maybe on Friday what Saturday tomorrow night's going to do. Right. But if I'm a 300-bedroom hotel, I've already sold 240 rooms through various other mixes. So what they do is they give a price. For example, the average price in a hotel this year, the average rate in Dublin this year for 2015 just gone was €112. That was the average price paid for a room. Now, if you listen to Trivago or some of them, they will tell you it's up to €298 or €400, which is completely ridiculous. Now, there are some rooms at that. And if you want a room in some of the hotels and you buy the presidential suite, you will pay that 400. But in many cases, that's all the rooms that are left for them to sell. And they're quoting those high prices. They'll also quote, I suppose, in Galway Race Week. Now, we have a couple of hotels in Galway, and I know people who go to racing in Galway every year. They book, the day they walk out this year, they ring and say, will you put me in again for next year? So where people book out in advance and book regularly, they get tremendous value. And that comes back to the same point we made probably at the beginning.
Thank you very much. The story what I've learned from this session is that to spend this year's winnings in Galway races on the hotel bed for next year, book early, that's when you get the best rate. Stephen and David, thank you so much for giving your valuable time and your immense expertise. It's been a great pleasure talking to you, pair. Thank you very much, guys.